The Woman on the Green, a story for the quiet hours. There is a place on Vancouver Island where the land meets the sea in a way that feels almost too beautiful to be real. The Victoria Golf Club sits at the edge of Oak Bay, one of the oldest and wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. If you were to visit on a summer afternoon, you would see emerald fairways rolling gently down toward the water, the grass so perfect it seems painted. Beyond the greens, rocky shores tumble toward the Pacific, and on clear days you can see the Olympic Mountains rising blue and distant across the strait. It is the kind of place where elderly gentlemen in pressed slacks discuss their handicaps over gin and tonics. The kind of place where money is old and quiet, where the homes that watch from the hills have names instead of numbers, where nothing hurried or ugly should ever intrude. But something did, once, a long time ago, and some say she never left. To understand what happened here, we need to travel back nearly 90 years to a time when Victoria was smaller and slower, when the oak trees that give this neighborhood its name were younger, when a young woman named Doris Thompson was just beginning her life. Doris was born in 1906 in Blackburn, Lancashire, one of those old English mill towns where the air always tasted faintly of coal smoke and the winters seemed to last forever. Her family emigrated to Canada when she was still a girl, crossing the Atlantic to start fresh in Victoria, a city that must have seemed impossibly green and mild after the gray skies of northern England. Her mother found work at a private hospital, and Doris followed in her footsteps, training as a nurse. By all accounts, she was a kind and capable young woman, the sort of person you would trust to hold your hand in a difficult moment. In 1930, when she was 24 years old, she married a man named Victor Gravlin. Victor was a few years older, charming in that way some men are, quick with a joke, good company at a party. He worked as a sports reporter for The Colonist, the city's morning newspaper, and he spent his happiest hours on the golf course with his brother Walter, who was the head professional at the Uplands Golf Club across town. Victor knew these fairways well. He loved the game, loved the camaraderie, loved the particular peace that comes from walking a quiet course in the early morning light. But Victor had another companion, one that loved him back in all the wrong ways. He drank, not socially, not occasionally. He drank the way some people drown, slowly and then all at once. By 1934, the drinking had cost him his job at the paper. By 1936, it had cost him his marriage. Doris had tried. She had tried for years. But there comes a point when love alone isn't enough to hold two people together, when the weight of someone else's demons becomes too heavy to carry. She moved out. She took a job as a live-in nurse for an elderly woman in Oak Bay, caring for her in one of those grand houses that still line the quiet streets. She was 30 years old. She had a 7-year-old son, a little boy called Walter in the newspapers of the time, though he would later go by Robin. Remember him. His part in this story comes later. Even after the separation, Doris and Victor were not quite finished with each other. That is the way of it sometimes, isn't it? Love doesn't end cleanly. It frays and tangles and catches on all the small moments you shared, all the hopes you once held together. In mid-September of 1936, Victor wrote Doris a letter. No one knows exactly what it said. The contents were never made public, but everyone believed it was a request, a plea perhaps, one more conversation, one more chance to make things right. She agreed to meet him. They chose a place they both knew well, the Victoria Golf Club, and the path that led from there to the Oak Bay Beach Hotel, an elegant old building with a cozy pub called the Snug, where they had spent many happy evenings in better times. It was a walk they had taken together often, back when the future still seemed like something worth walking toward. On the evening of September 22nd, 1936, a Tuesday, the last breath of summer still warm in the air, Doris left her employer's home around 7:45. Victor left his parents' house at about the same time. One witness saw them walking together along Runnymede Avenue as the light began to fade, and after that, silence. No one saw either of them again. A few days passed, worry turned to fear. Both families reported their missing loved ones to the police, and the search began in earnest. It ended on a Sunday morning in the most terrible way. A young caddy named John Johnson was walking the course near the seventh hole, searching for a ball that had gone astray. The seventh hole is one of the most beautiful on the course, a long par 4 that runs along the edge of the bluff, with the ocean stretching out below and the rocks tumbling down to the tide line. On a normal day, it is the kind of place that makes you grateful to be alive. But this was not a normal day. John noticed a woman's sweater lying on the beach below. It seemed out of place, abandoned there among the driftwood and the stones. He climbed down to investigate, and there, in the tall grass above the waterline, he found her. Doris Gravlin lay on her back, her body beaten and broken. She had been strangled. A heavy piece of driftwood, club-shaped, the kind the sea tumbles smooth over decades, lay nearby, and the investigators would later determine that this was the weapon that had struck her down. Her white kid shoes, the ones she had been wearing when she left for her walk, were gone. That same night, a resident living near the golf course had heard something. Around 9 o'clock, as darkness settled over the fairways, an anguished scream had torn through the evening air. No one had thought much of it at the time. Now the search took on a different character. Victor Gravlin was no longer a missing person. He was a suspect. A warrant was issued for his arrest. The police organized search parties. The provincial force joined the effort. Even a local Boy Scout troop combed the rocky shoreline, hoping to find some trace of the man who had vanished into the September night. A month passed. Autumn settled over the island, bringing with it shorter days and longer shadows. The leaves on the oak trees turned gold and amber, and the morning mists rolled in from the sea, thick and gray and cold. And then, on October 25th, a fisherman made a discovery. He was out on the water near the ninth fairway when he noticed something tangled in the kelp beds offshore. At first, he thought it might be debris, a log, perhaps, or a piece of wreckage from some forgotten boat. But as he drew closer, he realized what he was looking at. It was a body, bloated and pale, wrapped in seaweed. It had been in the water for weeks. The face was nearly unrecognizable, but the police identified him all the same. It was Victor Gravlin. In the inside pocket of his waterlogged coat, they found Doris's missing shoes. The case was closed. The official verdict, murder-suicide. Victor, despondent over the failure of his marriage and the ruin of his life, had killed the woman he loved and then walked into the cold Pacific to end his own suffering. And everyone accepted this explanation. Everyone moved on. Everyone, that is, except Doris. The Bell. Within months of the tragedy, strange reports began to surface. Golfers playing the back nine as the sun went down, couples walking the paths near the shore. Fishermen casting their lines off Gonzales Point, all of them telling the same story. There was a woman on the golf course, a woman who should not have been there. One of the first to see her was a fisherman, not the same one who found Victor, but another man who often came to the rocky shore below the seventh green to try his luck as the light faded. It was that liminal hour, the time between day and night, when the sky turns the color of a bruise and the world goes soft at the edges. He was focused on his casting, on the rhythm of the line and the pull of the water, when something made him turn around. He could never explain what, some instinct, some feeling of being watched. And there she was. A woman stood on the bank above him, just a few feet away. She was staring out at the kelp beds, out at the place where Victor's body had been found. She did not acknowledge the fisherman. She did not seem to know he was there at all. He noticed her clothes first. She wore a brown suit. Fashionable once, perhaps, but old-fashioned now, the kind of thing a woman might have worn in the early 1930s. In wealthy Oak Bay, where the ladies kept up with the latest styles from London and New York, it seemed out of place. He noticed the look on her face, too. Gloomy, he would later say, distant, as though she were waiting for someone who would never arrive. He went back to his casting. He did not know what else to do. She said nothing. He said nothing. The waves whispered against the rocks below. And then, as he watched from the corner of his eye, she began to move. She hurried down the slope, walking quickly, purposefully, as if rushing to meet someone, and halfway down she was gone. Not hidden, not walked away, gone. She had simply dissolved into the fading light, melting away like morning frost on glass. Over the years, the sightings continued, always in the same places, always at the same times. In the late afternoon, between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, people would see a woman in a brown suit walking near the seventh green. She moved with purpose, as if she had somewhere to be, as if she were hurrying to meet someone she loved. But later in the evening, between 9:30 and 10, she appeared differently. No longer the sensible brown suit. Now she wore white, a flowing gown that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her arms were outstretched, reaching towards something or someone, and her face, those who saw it said, was terrible in its grief. Why the two different appearances? Some have wondered if she is reliving the last day of her life. The brown suit in the afternoon, the practical outfit she wore as she walked to meet Victor, the white gown later, a kind of death shroud, the form her spirit takes now that the sun has set and the darkness has claimed her. Or perhaps she simply changes, the way the light changes, the way memory changes. Perhaps the living see different versions of her depending on what they are ready to see. There is a bell at the Victoria Golf Club near the 16th tee. In the old days, golfers would ring it to signal to the players ahead that they were waiting, that the group in front should pick up the pace. It is a simple thing, brass, mounted on a wooden post, the kind of small detail you might walk past 1,000 times without really noticing. But according to local legend, this bell has another purpose. They say that if you ring it 3 times at night, Doris will come. In the late 1970s, a group of teenagers decided to test this legend. It was a warm summer evening, the kind of night when the darkness feels soft and the stars seem close enough to touch. 4 of them drove out to the golf course after midnight, parked near the 16th tee, and walked out onto the fairway. One of them, a young man whose account would later be recorded by local historians, rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. At first, nothing happened. They stood there in the dark, giggling nervously, feeling foolish. The night was quiet. The grass was wet with dew. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. And then she appeared, a figure in white, glowing faintly, rising from the area near the seventh green. She did not walk toward them so much as drift, her feet seeming to hover just above the grass. Her arms were outstretched. Her face was impossible to make out, but they could feel her looking at them. They could feel her attention, cold and absolute, fixed upon them. They ran. Of course they ran. They scrambled back to their car, hearts pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps. As they fumbled with the keys, one of them looked back and saw her, still coming, still drifting toward them across the empty course. They drove away at speed, and as they passed the edge of the fairway, the sprinkler system suddenly activated, sending jets of water arcing into the night air. There was no reason for this. The system was not scheduled to run. The groundskeepers, when asked later, had no explanation. The teenagers never went back. Other places she haunts. The golf course is not the only place Doris wanders. The Oak Bay Beach Hotel, that elegant old building where she and Victor once shared drinks in the snug, has reported its own strange occurrences. The third floor, in particular, seems to be a focal point. Guests have reported cold spots that move through rooms with no draft, objects that shift position when no one is looking, a sense of being watched, of not being alone, even in an empty hallway. One guest, staying in a third floor room, woke in the middle of the night to find a woman standing at the foot of her bed. The woman was dressed in old fashioned clothes, her face pale, her expression unreadable. The guest tried to speak, tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, the woman was gone. Beach Drive, the road that runs along the waterfront near the hotel, has its own stories. Drivers have reported seeing a woman walking along the shoulder late at night, her white dress bright against the darkness. When they slow down to offer help, she vanishes. When they look in their rearview mirrors, the road behind them is empty. There is a pattern to these sightings, a geography of grief. The golf course where she died, the hotel where she spent happy hours, the road that connects them, the path she might have walked on her last evening alive. Doris seems bound to these places, tracing the same routes over and over, searching for something she lost, or perhaps trying to understand why she lost it. Not everyone who sees her escapes unscathed. There is an old story, passed down among Oak Bay residents, that couples who encounter Doris together will soon part. The ghost of a murdered wife, the victim of a marriage gone wrong, brings bad luck to those who are still in love. Some say this is intentional, that Doris is bitter, that she cannot bear to see others happy when her own happiness was stolen so violently. Others say it is simply a side effect, that her presence carries a kind of darkness that seeps into relationships and poisons them from within. It is a cruel kind of curse, if it is true, a warning perhaps to those who would seek out the ghost for thrills or entertainment. Be careful what you look for in the darkness. Be careful what looks back. And Doris may not be alone. Some say there is a second ghost on the Victoria golf course. An older woman, gray haired and determined, walking the fairways at night with a lantern in her hand. They say it is Victor's mother, a woman who never accepted the official story, who never believed that her son was capable of murder. She wanders the course still, searching for the truth, searching for the real culprit, looking for answers that never came. Perhaps she will find them someday. Or perhaps she too is trapped here, bound to this beautiful, terrible place by the weight of questions that can never be answered. The son. There was one person who knew nothing of any of this for most of his life. Doris's son, little Walter Robin, as he came to be called after his grandparents took him in. He was 7 years old when his mother was murdered and his father walked into the sea. 7 years old, and suddenly alone in a world that had torn itself apart around him. His grandparents raised him with love and care, but they made a decision, perhaps understandable, perhaps not, to shield him from the truth. They gave him a new name. They sent him to school in England, far from the whispers and the memories. They let him build a life that had nothing to do with the tragedy that had marked his beginning. Robin grew up. He joined the British Army, had a career, made a life for himself across the ocean. He rarely returned to Victoria. Why would he? It was just a place where he had lived as a small child, a place he barely remembered. He had no idea that his mother was famous. In 1994, nearly 60 years after Doris's death, a reporter tracked Robin down and called him for a comment. The reporter wanted to ask about the ghost, about the April ghost of the Victoria golf links, about the decades of sightings, about the legend that had grown up around his mother's restless spirit. Robin was stunned. He knew almost nothing about what had happened. No one had ever told him the details, not the murder, not the suicide, not the haunting. He asked the reporter for more information, trying to understand a story that had been kept from him his entire life. When the reporter called back a few days later, Robin had had time to think, time to process, and when asked how he felt about his mother's ghost, about the idea that she was still out there, walking the fairways where she died, he said something that has stayed with me ever since. He said, if it's history, then it's there and it's not going to go away. There is a legend, one of many, that says Doris's ghost would never rest until her son learned the truth about what happened to her. Well, he knows now, and she is still there. So what is she waiting for? Maybe she is waiting for Victor. Maybe some part of her still believes he will come walking up from the beach, sober and sorry, and ready to try again. Maybe she is trapped in that last hopeful moment, the moment before everything went wrong, playing it over and over like a record stuck in a groove. Maybe she is angry. Maybe she wants someone to know what really happened that night, to understand the fear and the pain and the terrible final betrayal. Maybe she reaches out to the living because she has no other way to speak. Or maybe she is just lonely. Maybe she is looking for someone to walk with her, someone to take her hand in the darkness and keep her company on that long, cold path between the fairways and the sea. If you ever find yourself in Oak Bay on a quiet evening, the kind of evening when the fog rolls in from the water and the golf course goes still and gray, you might want to walk down to Beach Drive. You might want to stand at the edge of the road and look out over the fairways, out toward the seventh green and the rocky shore beyond. Listen for the bell. If you hear it ring once, twice, 3 times, don't wait to see what comes next. But if you do wait, if you stand there in the gathering dark and watch the mist rise from the water, you might see her, a woman in white, arms outstretched, moving toward you across the grass. She has been waiting a long time. The staff at the Victoria Golf Club still talk about her. When something goes wrong, a door that won't stay closed, a light that flickers for no reason, a strange chill in a room that should be warm, they smile and shake their heads. Doris is playing tricks on us again. It is said lightly, like a joke, but there is something in their eyes when they say it, something that suggests they are not entirely sure it is a joke at all. The general manager of the club, in an interview some years ago, admitted that strange things happen on the course. Ghost hunters have come, he said, with their equipment and their cameras, hoping to capture evidence of the haunting. They never find anything definitive, but the staff, whether they believe in ghosts or not, have felt something, a presence, an awareness, the sense that they are not alone, even when the course is empty and the clubhouse is quiet and the night has settled in around them like a blanket. So that is the story of Doris Gravlin, the April ghost, the woman on the green, a young woman who came to Canada full of hope, who fell in love with the wrong man, who walked out to meet him one September evening and never came home, a wife, a mother, a nurse who cared for others, and a ghost who has haunted this beautiful, windswept corner of the world for nearly 90 years. If it's history, then it's there and it's not going to go away. Sleep well now. The fog is thick tonight, and the waves are gentle, and the golf course is quiet. Quiet, but perhaps not empty. Good night.